and let's accept the recording. So we want to talk to you a little bit today about how do we do user research and actually see an impact in the end of the tunnel, right? Because like some of us might think user research is something for user researchers or for designers, when actually like you see that there's a place for engineers in user research, and this makes engineers quite strong, to be fair. Next slide, please, Javier. So the session we want to, like, the goal of today is really to give you some practical tools to show off these user research skills as engineers. So you can test and learn what adds the most value to your users. So in the end, you have a valuable product and which you can sell as a startup, or you can realize your career dreams, if you will, get a job, be promoted. So this all applies. Next slide, please. So talking a little bit about ourselves, I'm this ugly fellow on your right. So Vitor Knaip, I'm a product manager in VMware Tanzu Labs. I am originally from Brazil. I had a fintech there, and poor communities. Let me pass the microphone, the metaphorical microphone, to my friend Aviel here.
Hello, hey Vitor. You're not that ugly, that's okay, don't worry about it. Hi, my name is Aviel Strick. I'm originally from Israel. I moved to London 5 years ago. My background in product management was mostly around financial technology products, and I joined VMware a couple of years ago, and specifically working on R&D, which is research and development, so building platforms and tools that support customers that are using platforms. And I started my career around 10 years ago in marketing and sales in technology companies as well.
Oh, so we want to, like, I guess if we're talking about building products that really matter, I think the best framework I can give you is this one here that we call discovery and framing, or for the most experienced ones, you might have heard of the double diamond somewhere. So the idea here is really about, next slide, please. The idea here is really about like discovering what is the problem that is worth solving. And I'm gonna share these slides with you later, or like if the org doesn't want that, like just ping me particular, I can share that with you. So it's a discovery piece is about like understanding out of all the problems that are out there, what are the ones that are worth solving, and the framing is about, given that problem, what are the solutions that we can start like brainstorming and prioritizing, right? So we're gonna talk about a little bit of how does it work in one example product that IVL in particular worked, and we're gonna like every now and then we're gonna say, hey, this is where we use that framework and that other framework. Yeah, IVL, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for the great introduction, Vitor. So Victor will talk with you more about the discovery and framing process in more detail in a few moments. But just to give more context around the product that we are going to talk about. So one of the outcomes that we had in one of the discovery and framing processes we've gone through was defining a set of problems that made it hard for IT teams to manage their fleets of databases. So they had different resources, different artifacts that enable the teams to run software. They were all around the world, different servers, different locations. It was really hard to control and know who is using which database, when, is it efficient, is it being utilized, etc., etc. So the problem was really fleets of services, fleets of databases that were all around and were uncontrolled. So after a few iterations, we released a working minimum viable product, which is an MVP. MVP is basically a version of the product with just enough features to be usable by early customers who can then provide feedback for future product development. Yeah, so just in a glance, the problems that we were looking at were customers found it really hard to self-service, to keep track of their inventory of databases, and to monitor those databases. So that was basically the outcome of the discovery and framing exercise. We were laser focused on these three problems. So once we have a set of problems that we know that we want to work on, and also as part of the framing process, you would also come with some initial solutions, something to start with so that you can validate and ask customers questions. As a follow-up to the discovery and framing, we started to go through several iterations before building this MVP. And what you see here on the screen is one of the main principles in the Lean Startup book, which is highly recommended by Eric Ries. The build, measure, learn cycle basically turn uncertainties, assumptions, and risks into real knowledge that you can leverage to build new features, to build a strategy, basically anything that your business and your customers need. So as you can see here on the right, sorry, we have small diamonds. So we see these diamonds as the build, measure, learn loop. So they're faster than the big diamonds, the big discovery and framing, because we need to move fast in intervals of 1, 2, sometimes 3 weeks, depends on the organization. So VMware is and B2B enterprise. We build enterprise tools, so very complex platforms. So sometimes the intervals will be a bit longer than e-commerce, for example, like mobile applications and Instagram. It will be slower because the software is more complex. It requires more validation, but we still need to aim to move as fast as possible. And sometimes we fail. Sometimes we learn that, oh, actually the solution that we came up with is not what customers need. But even when we fail, we still learn and leverage those learnings. So yeah, I will hand it back to Vito, who will talk about the discovery, which is the left diamond.
Yeah, thanks, Aviel. So the session here around discovery, what I really want to talk about is that what are the frameworks, what are the exercises that we use at each stage of the diamond? And I think this should be slightly more practical than only looking at a picture, right? Feel free to take screenshots of anything. When I shared the slides with you, you also be able to click on those links in the bottom right. This should give us like a little bit more color. But anyway, so we're talking about like, okay, so we have to find the problems that we're solving, but how do we do that, right? So the first thing you have to do is after you have like a few ideas of problems to solve, either in you might be again in a startup, or you're sitting at your living room just thinking about how to become a billionaire, or how to help your community, or how to like land a job, how to do better in your current job. You always start with, hey, what are the assumptions that need to be true in order for this problem to really exist, right? So what are the things that has to be actual in order for my problem to really exist? This is a way to like remove bias from your process. So you essentially generate all of these things, all of these pillars to that support your problem idea. And then you essentially prioritize them and put them on a list and say, okay, so now I have like this list of 5 or 6 assumptions without which my problem is not real. It's not worth solving. Let's talk to people, right? And see what they say about it. Next slide, please. So when you go talk to people, you essentially do like you come up with like you already have those assumptions, right? And out of those assumptions, you write questions. How do you like ask someone a question that will validate or invalidate those assumptions? That's the whole trick, right? So there are a few techniques, like you don't ask yes or no questions, for instance, because it biases the answer. You don't like agree too much nor disagree too much. So we can talk about this about some of the techniques in order to like basically mine data from qualitative data from humans, if you will. But you start with a discussion guide or a research script, interview script, and you take that under your belt and go talk to people. You take notes. Hopefully, you're working not by yourself but with a team. So I see here Devi not being able to see the screen. The contents are not really important. This is more about you have to look at, you have to come up with questions on the left. Go talk to people, and when you're talking to people, please make sure you're taking notes, and those notes will help you synthesize the learnings. You get together with the team to then like spot patterns on those notes. We can talk about that later if you want. But that clear? Cool. So after you talk to enough customers, can you move 2 slides? Yes, thank you, Javier. After you talk to enough customers, and here we can see in our table we have 5 columns. One after, please. Yes. So you can see in the table at the right hand side. Please don't mind the contents not visible. What I want you to pay attention to is really about how do you visually communicate your findings with the team. So no matter what the assumptions are, the important thing is, so see how we are doing. We are scoring each assumption at each column, whether it has been validated as a green, whether it's invalidated, it's red, so it's not true, or whether it's partially validated, so which is yellow. We use gray to say like it's not applicable. So this person that we talked to, they never mentioned that. They never mentioned that assumption. So by doing that a few times, you'll be able to you see that your learning curve, you start to stabilize. So you're not learning too much. Your marginal, like diminishing marginal returns, if you will, to doing research. Next slide, please. Once you know enough, you wanna think about getting together with your team and say, okay, so let's map the story of this problem. So tell me an end-to-end story of like what is the context for that problem. And again, what I want you to focus here is less on the content, because the content can be quite generic here in this slide. What I want you to think about is this is pretty much telling a story to someone. You probably have or will do story mapping when you're creating a backlog. But what I want to do, what I want you to look at here is, this is a depiction of a step-by-step journey of a person engaging with the current solution. However, currently they solve the problem. This is what you want to understand. Aviel is doing a little bit of a zoom in. When I go back, Aviel, a little bit, it feels the image is not super clear. So what I want you guys to take away from this screen is the flow, is the left to right flow. Make sure you do that. There is a link to a workshop there that is very useful. This will help you align with your team about the problem. You guys are talking about the same thing. Alignment is one of the most expensive things in the work life. Next, please. So assuming that you did that with your team, you have a physical whiteboard in your office space or on your bedroom, or you have like a digital whiteboard like Miro or any other, and you make sure that you and your team have the single share the single source of truth about the problem. Now it's time for you to collect this molecule map, which is another way to say like a collection of problems. This is like a persona has a problem, and now you're gonna brainstorm possible solutions for that problem. You're gonna generate so many of them, and then you're gonna prioritize. Next one, please. After generating so much of those molecules, plot them on a 2x2, and think about the axis as more value to the company that you represent or more value to the customer, and about risk. And risk, think about as a proxy for uncertainty, how much you know about it. And you might realize that the signs are switched, so less risk is to the right. This is intentional. You want to make sure that like our brains are hardwired to look at the top right by now. So you want to make sure that you pick the solutions, you pick the problems there at the top right, and you bring it forward. This is your prioritization. There's a link there for you to search more about 2x2 matrix. And then, so right now you have your top problems, and now you have to brainstorm solutions, right? Visual solutions. And Aviel is going to tell us a story about how they did it with this product.
So basically after exploring a few solutions, we started to think about what MVP would look like. And one of the exercises that we went through is Crazy 8, where you could read online about it. So basically you gather the team, and the team, obviously engineers in general should be involved, are encouraged to be involved in any stage of the life cycle of building a product. So in that stage, you can have engineers, even marketing, sales, product, everyone that has a high interest in this problem space. So Crazy 8 is a fun exercise where you all sit in a room and you go through 8 iterations of designing a solution, a mock-up sketch, and it can be that there's no limitation for what we can do with it. Even if it's a very technical product, you can still find a way to come up with solutions. And it's amazing to see how people, under time pressure, they become more and more creative. Yeah, another way to go about it is to use design and sketching tools to quickly design low fidelity mockups. So basically a visualization of the solution that you're proposing without going into too much detail. It can be even black and white, and then people who see it, they will understand that it's not a real product, so they won't have like high expectations. They won't expect the user experience to be too polished, so they will give you feedback on the core product, the core problem that you are trying to solve.
If I might add 2 cents to it, Aviel, if you don't mind. So when we use mockups, one of the big values of a mockup, and you can do like different levels of fidelity. So you can use Balsamiq to do on the top right, on the right, to build low fidelity mockups. This is really useful like in the early stages of your product when you don't really have a fleshed out idea of what you're designing, but you want to put that in front of users before writing any code, because it saves time. Writing code is time consuming, and you want to make sure you're building the right thing. But after a few iterations with Balsamiq, you might wanna move to like more like sophisticated tools like Figma or even InVision, because then you can have a screen like this one that screen shows, and again, put that in front of users, and actually put clickable prototypes in front of users and watch how they interact with it. Even watch not only what they do with the screen, like where they put their cursor on, but also like physically how they react. Do they squint? Do they like lean forward? This type of things. Like which finger do they use in an iPad, in a touch screen? This type of thing. So this like mockups save you a lot of time before building code, because it allows you to build the right thing. You can iterate more easily on the mockup than on code.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree, and it valid both internally and externally. So even before or while showing it to customers, you can get buying from people on your team or outside your team in your organization. And obviously, the bigger the organization is, the more complex it is, and you need to make sure that everyone that has interest in this product will see it. But it just helps to really communicate the proposed solution both internally and externally. And with some of those tools, we won't go into too much detail around how to use those tools, but you can also, it's cloud, many of these tools are cloud-based, so you can comment and share feedback on the specific screens, and even on specific point in the design. You can say, oh, maybe we should try and move this button to the bottom or something like that, and then to collaborate with your team in a more efficient way. All right, so once we have the first iteration of the product, we have something, we have an MVP, then we want to start and iterate and learn. It's all about learning. So as I mentioned earlier, the build, measure, learn cycle. So it's not one framework that you use one time and that's it. That's a mindset. So whatever you do, think how it contributes to the build, measure, or learn, and make sure that you do this cycle in a as short as possible iterations. So for example, in our case, we started by building a very basic version of the product. So we knew basically we wanted to make it easier for IT teams to troubleshoot problems that app developers are experiencing with the databases in large and complex environments. So we started with a very simple interface that simply exposed all the databases that teams are responsible for. That was the MVP, and we didn't invent anything new. We just used existing functions and just added a few user interface components so that people can interact with. And once we had this MVP, we started to collect data. We started to measure and ask questions like, if you had a problem with database X, how would you solve it with this tool? How much time would it save to your team? How much? How would it work with your existing workflows? Will it keep you? Will it help you solve the most critical problems? So this is kind of the questions that help us to take qualitative data and take it into account when measuring the solution that we build. So as you know, VMware is a big enterprise. Our users are always folks working for enterprise, for big complex organizations, and we were wondering how we might go about talking with those people, because it's not easy to reach out to them. So we tried few things, and as I mentioned a few questions just now, we would always have discussion guide in hand. So we'd have a list of, okay, what are the goals, what we want to learn, what are the questions we want to ask, and who we want to talk to. So, and we learned a lot of things, and sometimes we will learn, oh, actually, customers don't just want, for example, a graphical user interface like I showed you in the previous slides, but they want to consume the software directly, so an API. So they want to interact with an API so that it will interact with their internal system. So we added that feature to the roadmap. for example, as a result of this learning and asking customer questions. And ideally, we will try to meet the customers in person, but we are a global company, so it's not always possible. So we'll use video calls and softwares like Zoom to have those conversations. And we also have a Spring One platform conference that takes place once a year. So we had a goal to release the MVP before the conference, and in the conference we met with many customers, and not only customers but also internal people from VMware, so sales people, support people that we also wanted to hear them and see how they think it will help to their customers. And yeah, so in one conference in 3-4 days we spoke with tens of customers and internal people from VMware, and it helped us to get a lot of data. So everything would be documented, recorded, and then when we went back to the office, we will put everything on a whiteboard and we will start to cluster all this information and quotes that customers gave us. So yeah, we would always keep track as for where customers are. So we segmented something like 50 customers that we thought would benefit a lot from this product. And this is basically an example for a funnel. So we knew at any given time how many customers were aware. So we knew who we talked to and when, and what was their feedback. We knew how many downloaded, how many installed, and how many actually started to use the product. And the learning, so that's the final stage of this cycle is to learn. And basically that's the stage where we need to decide what we are going to do with all this data. And as an early stage product, we had to decide on a strategy. And this is a book that I would highly recommend to read, and that will help you frame a strategy. So the first part of the strategy was to decide on a diagnosis, and diagnosis defines the nature of the challenge, what really matters about the problem, what is the environment that we are facing with. And then we have the guiding policy. Guiding policy is an overall approach that is chosen in order to cope with or overcome obstacles that are identified in the diagnosis. And finally, we have the action. So how are we going to execute the guiding policy? And then, so that was the last stage of the build, measure, learn. But as I said, it's an ongoing process. So always keep build, measure, and learn. So that's an example of our product after a few months of iteration. So you can see that we had a dashboard that make it easier to identify problems and monitor consumption of databases. I will hand it over to Vito to recap.
Thanks, Aviel. So a really quick recap before we jump to the Q&A, because we don't have too much time. Next slide, please. So keep in mind that discovery and framing is about understanding just enough to build code. So it's not about you like going indefinitely, like doing research and never build code, but this de-risks your product decision so you can hit the ground running, right? Next one. But you have to keep learning. So the DNF only sets the foundation, continues the secret to a successful product. And a successful product career is to get used to continuous learning, continuous research in parallel with delivery. So the build, measure, learn cycle, that's how it happens. Next one. So engineers are more effective when they are part of research. So as a product manager, and in some companies, product managers also help hiring. Engineers who are proficient in research and they understand the difference between a feature and an outcome, and how uncertain things can be, is really, really valuable. Like they make my life as a product manager much easier, and I would encourage you to be interested in research. Next slide. And whenever you're working on a team, try to over-invest in visual frameworks. So use whiteboards, like grab a marker and like draw a picture and point to that picture. So before we discuss anything, make that visual, make that visible. And so you can think together and stay aligned. So in terms of product strategy, you've seen that it's both about research and action. So it's not only about sitting in the living room and thinking about how strategic we can be. We're all smart people, but in the end, you have to think just enough so you can act. And by acting, you're going to learn and adjust the strategy. So the build, measure, learn thing also applies to strategy. As I'm saying, like strategy is iterative as much as a product itself. And so if you go to the next slide, so here you see a few other books. You can take a screenshot now, or we'll be sharing these slides later. But these are books that can really support your development as and product thinking, like this mindset that Aviel was talking about. So yeah, we can talk about more about this during the Q&A if you have any questions. Yeah, so like I'm always doing, can you please throw your question in the chat? We have 8 minutes to tackle as many questions as we can. So let's start with this one here. How to do research related to about product? How to do research related to product, like what resources we should use and what things engineers must avoid while researching. So I can take this one. So Amol, I would strongly recommend engineers to take a step back from thinking about features and really thinking about problems, right? So it's very easy. So engineers, I like to think about engineers as like they're the engine of a team. So like they are the power, the horsepower of a team, right? But they can like maximize the horsepower by understanding a little bit of the process that fills out a backlog. So don't think about too early about features. Think about the problems and make sure that the problem is real. So Shahad here is asking, what are the prerequisites for applying for a product manager post as a fresher? Aviel, want to take that one, or it's on me?
What are the prerequisites for applying for product management post as a fresher? So is this question around how to become a product manager after being an engineer for a while? Or I would assume that yes. Okay, cool. So I think no matter what you do, I mean, I can tell about myself. I did product management before I knew what product management is. As part of my marketing role, I just saw an opportunity and I initiated a new product or a new problem to solve. So I think the most important thing is really to show that you can solve, not only that you can, but you want to solve problem and you can identify a problem. And I think user research is a great way to get involved. So if you are part of a group that build products and you are the engineer, one of the engineers in the group, then always ask, what do customers say? Can I speak to customer? How can we gain meaningful insights out of this data? So really get involved and always think about the customer. And I've seen engineers that transitioned in their mindset. They were very solution focused, and they thought about the technology, how to build amazing technology. But once they spoke with customers, you could see they had these moments of, aha, okay, yeah, now I think that this will work for this and this customer, like real people. So I think these are a few of the things that I would be looking at.
Yeah. So I wouldn't to that point, I wouldn't think too much about prerequisites, but like whenever there's a job for a product manager, even as a junior, it's typically called associate product manager, I think. And So if you're used to like using a whiteboard and you're used to like concepts of lean methods like this build, measure, learn, and you understand the value of getting input from people, this will probably be a head start. You can look at the books that we added in the previous slide that I'm gonna share. It's a good head start. Next one from Hardik. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. What are the most commonly made mistakes while doing research and how to avoid them? Aviel, you want to take that one?
Yes, I can share a few mistakes that I've done in the past. I think not recording the findings and delaying it is a big mistake. So try, as soon as you do the research, as soon as you speak with a person, take notes, record it if you can. And I would even recommend to block 1 hour to watch it again and take even more notes. Another mistake could be not to come prepared to an interview, so not defining goals and not knowing what you really want to achieve out of this conversation. So really defining goals is critical. And I think the biggest mistake would be not to do research at all. So not be afraid to make mistake and yeah, just speak with people. And as I mentioned earlier, people could be internal and external as well, depends on the stage of the product.
Yeah, so we are almost on time. Last question. So is there any master degree required for the research sector or only skills are enough? So no, I think actually this is a really probably Kelly, who's the next speaker, can talk more about this. Kelly is more used to leading user research from a design perspective. But my take from working with product designers and UX researchers is that you don't necessarily need a master degree. But experience, like if you can like provide your like future employer with some background to like of the stuff that you've done that involved research. So showing a portfolio is typically more valuable than a CV, right? Of course, you can take skills from a master, but you can take skills from practice and have been working with in a team that has a strong practice. On-the-job learning is also useful there. We might have, yeah, Aviel, you go.
No, I just wanted to mention that there are plenty of courses out there online, offline. So I think if research is a specific topic that you are interested in, then a course would be more valuable, I think, to over doing a master degree. A master degree can have other benefits, but if it's specifically for research, I would rather go for a course, a practical one that will enable you to do like a project and research on a real problem.
Mm-hmm. So we have 1 minute to the next session, and I'm mindful there are a few really good questions here. I don't mind taking them and then posting it somewhere after this session, because we don't want to like enter like Kelly's session. So everyone, so Hardik, Pujita, and Sushmita, I'm gonna post our answers to your questions later. That's okay.
We can maybe stick around in the Zoom for a few minutes.
So, Hemant, can we do that? Or Kelly's session is about to start?
Yeah, I think we can start a Kelly session now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to thank Mr. Victor and Avel for taking this informative session. And now I would request Mr. Kelly to take over the session from here. I request Kelly to introduce yourself and start the session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I assume you guys can see my presentation now. Let's see. Okay, just gonna keep the chat window open. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Kelly. I am a product designer at VMware, sometimes known as a UI or UX designer. And today I'm going to talk about how design works on a product that doesn't have a user interface. So I work in the data services group at VMware, specifically on a product called Gemfire. So today I'll talk about my job as a designer, how I usually work with engineers and assist them in their work. And then I'll also talk a little bit about Gemfire and go over a case study of an example of a project I did with my team to kind of show you how design and engineering can work together. So first I'm going to touch on the value of product design. So you can think of the product designer as the captain that steers the ship toward finding the best solution for customers. So we usually call ourselves the customer advocate or the advocate for the user. It's our responsibility to have a big picture view of the entire process and be involved at every step, from defining real user problems to tracking success metrics. So we'll go from defining the strategy of a project or product and defining the problem statement all the way to after we release it and we're testing that new product and making sure that it's correct for our users and that it's successful. The evidence for all decisions related to design come from stakeholders, the team, and the users, as well as that designer's particular experience. So product designers identify and validate problems. We work cross-functionally, meaning we work with product and engineering, as well as sometimes like data scientists or marketing. We develop wireframes to explore possible solutions and prototype the best ideas to put in front of users to get feedback. When you're working on a product that doesn't have a user interface, you have to get kind of creative with wireframes, which I might be able to talk about later. We're also responsible for supporting developers through launching the final product, working with marketing to craft the right story, and following the success of the product once it's out in the wild. Product designers use everything that they learn in their work to help define the product vision, conduct product research, brainstorm and ideate, design and prototype, conduct user testing, launch products, and then conduct post-launch activities like continuous discovery and user testing. So this picture is actually from when my team went on site with a customer to see how they use our product and figure out where they were struggling so that we could make their experience with it a little bit better. So you need someone to prioritize the user, research their problems, and build a product that solves those problems. You want to create an experience where users feel delighted and appreciated and want to keep coming back. That is the value of product design. So how can designers impact data products? Every product has a user experience. Anything that a user does or sees is part of the user experience. This includes documentation, commands, error logs, and any other actions they take or responses they see. So, for example, Gemfire is a data service. It doesn't really have a graphical user interface. So the kinds of things I work on are like the structure of the command line that a user would use to utilize Gemfire. I might help my team create documentation or guides and really focus on the developer experience or the operator experience, which I'll talk about soon. So in data services, it's my responsibility to align across the data services. At VMware, we have, in the pillar that I'm in, we have 4 different products that have 4 different uses. Those are RabbitMQ, Gemfire, Tanzu SQL, and Greenplum. So it's my responsibility that when developers are doing tasks that are the same across data services, that they don't have a drastically different experience. So we try to make sure that if you're using products from the same company, that you have a similar experience between products. I also help to define and emphasize best practices. With a product like Gemfire, it's pretty old. It's got some solid best practices and some suggested new best practices, and it can be pretty complex. So it's our responsibility to make sure that developers have the correct tools to be successful in using such a robust and complex data product. I also assist my leadership, that's product and engineering leadership, with design research, testing, creating workflows for new features or functionality, among other things. So basically creating any sort of experiment or user research to get answers to the questions that we have for any new products that we're creating. So within the data services team, there's a designer on each product. So we meet weekly as a design team. We're actually across many time zones. I'm in the Eastern time zone in the US. We have a designer in California. We have a designer in Beijing, and I think we'll soon have another designer in Beijing. So our team covers like something like 9 time zones, which is always very interesting. I'm comparing user journeys and workflows to align across products, which is something that I just talked about. And within those best practices, I'm conducting user research to define personas, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. I help to identify pain points with our product. So we might interview our customers and ask them what their experience is with Gemfire. We might observe them using it and identify how they're having a hard time with it that way. There are a lot of different options to doing user research. I help my team to brainstorm solutions to solving those pain points that we identified. And we are constantly speaking to our customers and testing with users so that we're up to date with what their needs are from something like Gemfire, which is an in-memory data grid. And for assisting leadership, I'll usually have bi-weekly meetings with product and engineering leads, and individual sessions with PMs to ask questions, assist with user research, and update them on relevant information. So as a designer, I'm also kind of the liaison between the engineering and product side and the design group. So I'm actually a part of the design organization. So any updates that happen there, or changes or decisions that might affect our product or our company as a whole, I'm responsible for communicating that to my team. So how is user research valuable? So far, it's helped me to create evidence-based personas, which means that whenever I've had conversations with customers, I took notes about their roles, their responsibilities, the structure of their company, and we created these personas, which are representations of our users. That helps us to make informed decisions for our product. So we know what our personas need, we know that what their problems are and what they're expecting from a product like Gemfire, and we can use that information to create a product that's useful for them. And that goes along with customer insights to inform product decisions. User research also just helps us understand the user's experience and to test if our product that we've created to solve our customers' problems is actually usable, useful, and intuitive. So I'm going to go through a case study, and then after I'm done with this case study, we can go through some of these Q&A questions. So first, I want to give some background on Gemfire. So Tanzu Gemfire is an in-memory key value caching layer that is highly performant and highly available. And just to give some more background, Tanzu is a suite of products, cloud products. So Gemfire is just a part of this Tanzu platform. The Tanzu Gemfire architectural model is a client-server model. The clients are apps or microservices, and the servers are a set of servers within a Tanzu Gemfire service instance. The servers provide the data store within Tanzu Gemfire. So in this case, in-memory means a type of purpose-built database that relies primarily on memory for data storage, in contrast to databases that store data on disk or SSDs, which allows Gemfire to be very performant. Performant meaning response time given the particle size of an object. So most people are going to come to Gemfire or use Gemfire to increase their application performance. And in this case, highly available means you can retrieve your data when you need it and fast. We've got pretty solid uptime with Gemfire. So the primary use case that we promote with Gemfire is caching. So what is caching? Caching is storing the result of an operation so that future requests return faster. So we might cache when computation is slow, when a computation will run multiple times, when the output for a particular input will be the same, or to save on hosting costs because the hosting provider charges for database access. So some of these benefits of caching can be improving application performance, reducing database cost, reducing the load on the back end, and increasing read throughput. So when would I use Gemfire? Some of our customer use cases include using it for a front page for a website, for frequent lookups, for example, calculating copay for your health insurance plan, to store a session for things like a shopping cart, your preferences, or your recently viewed items, so often in like e-commerce, and primarily because it's focused on performance for updating heavy apps. So banking, billing, insurance, inventory, logistics, online e-commerce, manufacturing, risk management, and trading. So there are some really cool things that use Gemfire, like China Railways, MasterCard, things that really have to deal with like a high volume of transactions. So some of the value that our customers get from Gemfire is that they get isolation from a shared backend database. So you can think of the cache as a materialized view of the backend data. So you don't always have to go back to your data store to retrieve something that you're retrieving often. You can just grab it from the cache, which is in memory. So it's a lot faster. You get high availability, which is uptime. That's something that's really important to our customers. They don't want their applications to be slow or not be able to retrieve data. You get performance, you get load balancing, and horizontal scale, which is this concept of in-memory data grids. Okay, so in this specific case study, I'm just going to walk through a user research project that I did with my team and show you guys the outcome of that project. So you can see from research goal to an actual outcome within our product or a thing that we create, how does that research inform the decisions that we make as a product? So for this research goal, we wanted to understand the role and responsibilities of service operators. This is the person who's responsible for managing services. So the person who would be responsible for managing Gemfire. I realized that we had been hyper-focused on the application developer and their needs. But as we spoke to customers, we realized that there was another role that really had to spend a lot of time managing Gemfire, and we wanted to reduce that responsibility for that role for our customers. So the hypothesis that we started with for this research was that we believe that operators have a problem getting started with getting Tanzu Gemfire configured and up and running. So that was our hypothesis. We wanted to either prove or disprove that, or just get some more general information around that hypothesis. So usually what I do before we start even planning or scheduling user research is create a user interview script. So you can see this is for Tanzu Gemfire. It's what we call an exploratory interview. So I'm not putting a product necessarily in front of the customer. We're creating a script to ask them a series of questions. And the goal is to have an open-ended conversation with that customer. So hopefully the questions would act as prompts, and then they would be able to give us valuable information of, issues they've faced using Gemfire, or things they want or have expected from Gemfire that they weren't getting. We always like to lay out our assumptions. This is what we assume to be true, and it would be really risky if that were untrue. So we lay out our assumptions that we can find out during our research if these are true or untrue. So we were assuming that there's a hard line between the responsibilities of an operator versus a developer. So a developer has a set number of tasks that they do, an operator has another set of tasks that they do, and there's never any crossover there. We're also assuming that it's hard to get started with Gemfire because that's what we were hearing from our customers. So we outlined our key goals for this research. We wanted to understand what responsibilities operators have in various organizations. We wanted to understand the line between the responsibilities of a developer and an operator as it relates to Tanzu Gemfire and other data services, like maybe RabbitMQ, for example. We wanted to understand the typical background experience that operators have, i.e. what their required skill set is. And we wanted to understand the expectations that operators have for the products that they install. For example, out of the box, I expected to do XYZ and integrate with my XYZ. So if we can understand the expectations that our customers have with our product, hopefully we can satisfy those expectations, make them happier, and that would increase their consumption of Gemfire. So we interviewed some internal team members. So within VMware, we have a role that's called like maybe solutions engineers or platform architects. And they're kind of experts on products like Gemfire or other data services. And they work directly with our customers to support their use of Gemfire. So whenever they face an issue or they have a new request, these internal team members are really aware of what our customers are doing and the pain that they're facing. And we also wanted to speak directly to customers. Sometimes we would ask these internal team members, can you connect us with our customers so that we can have a conversation with them? Number one, we get information direct from the customer. And number two, we build a strong relationship with that customer. So they realize that we're interested in creating a useful product for them so that they can be successful in whatever outcome they're driving toward. And our customer feedback after each user interview has always been that they really appreciated that we're reaching out to solve the problems that they're facing instead of just leaving them alone to deal with them. And then I usually just define the schedule for these user interviews. We'll do some sort of introduction and background, and then we'll get into questions. So with background, we introduce ourselves. We try to get to know our user that we're interviewing, and then we'll start to ask some general questions around the research goals that we outlined so that we can answer the questions or achieve the goals that we set out to. So we'll start asking about what products they're currently managing. So like that will help us understand how many data services are you managing? How much time do you have to spend managing Gemfire? What tools they use regularly so that maybe later we can integrate very easily with those tools. How are responsibilities split on your team, their experience with Gemfire and the kinds of applications they're using with Gemfire. So the more we can understand our customers' use cases, the better we can create a product that suits them. And here are just some more example questions that we might ask. We kept hearing that it was difficult to get started using Gemfire, so we wanted to understand specifically what that meant. So we might ask something like, when tackling a new problem or technology, how do you, the operator, usually get started? And that might help us to create the proper tools or have guides on the proper websites to help an operator get started with using Gemfire. Another good example question here is, are there any approvals that are required before you are permitted to use a new service? If yes, what are they? This is useful because if, for example, an operator wants to use Gemfire within their company, if we're aware of the kinds of approvals that Gemfire needs to go through, we can provide, accurate materials or just be prepared for that process so that it's more likely that a customer can adopt using our service. And then we started asking questions around roles and responsibilities. I can also speak to the value of user research for me as a product designer. So if I am making decisions that will affect the product and therefore the developer's experience, it's important for me to understand the developer's role, or in this case, the operator's role. So we ask questions around what roles are responsible for operating service tiles and keeping them running. How are responsibilities divided? What are developers responsible for when it comes to managing service tiles? So usually management is an operator's role. So we're curious where that crossover is. What is the operator's responsibility when it comes to helping teams get started with Tanzu Gemfire? And a lot more questions like that. During these interviews, we'll usually use a tool like Miro. That's a virtual whiteboard tool. And I've got each of my users with different colors, what their jobs are, what company they're from. We took a bunch of sticky notes and then we grouped those notes into different themes. So like, these are the pain points. These are their wants and needs. These are their feelings about Kubernetes. This is information around roles and responsibilities. And as a team, we'll go through that research synthesis after we've done all of our interviews, and we'll pull out key insights. Another tool that we use at VMware is called Dovetail. This is a tool that you use to organize your user research. So Miro is kind of like a sloppy, this is where I take notes, this is where we brainstorm and pull them together, whereas Dovetail is a much more organized tool. So I put all of our research in, I put the video recordings of our conversations, and then I was able to tag and highlight different things that our customers said. So I highlighted these, for example, we got this comment that about, it's all about the network. Sometimes we'll check the network to see if it's good enough. So that's, for me, that's an idea for a new tool, a way to help them check the network. Or for example, we got a lot of comments on observability and monitoring. Something as specific as monitoring capabilities need to be improved. Sometimes they'll talk about other tools they use that are not useful, so we can go and explore those tools and understand why they're not useful. And we just got some requests for like educational tools, how operators can learn how to use Gemfire, how they can help themselves, how they can read metrics. So you can see, after I went through and tagged all of that data, it's really easy for me to go in if I'm working on a specific project. Like, let's say I'm working on Tanzu Gemfire for Kubernetes, and I want to make sure we're addressing all of our customer pain points. I can just go into Dovetail, click this Kubernetes section, and see everything that my customers have said to me about Kubernetes during this research effort. So one of the outcomes of that user research is we were able to create these evidence-based personas. And like I was saying earlier, a persona is like a snapshot. It's a representation of the person whose responsibility is this group of things. So within Tanzu Gemfire, we know that our primary personas are the application developer and the service operator. So through our research, I learned all of this about service operators, that they are the one who operate the service tiles and keep them up and running. They're responsible for upgrades, helping their teams get started, or giving them a cache. They handle errors and problems from their application teams. They're responsible for ensuring quality and security requirements are met. They have to meet the requirements of industry-related regulations. So for example, if they're within the financial industry and they have security requirements, the operator is responsible for those requirements, and therefore so is Gemfire. And they're also responsible for managing and/or allocating resources. So determining how much memory, for example, a given application team is allowed to use. So we were also able to determine what they want from Gemfire. So on a high level, they want to be able to manage a lot of Gemfire at one time. They want to do that on a user interface and not necessarily command line like they do now, or using an API. They want alerts when issues pop up that are proactive, and alerts that tell them what the information is that they're seeing and what they can do with it to fix the problems that they're facing. They want really easy security integrations. They want to be able to flexibly control roles and permissions, because we found that there was a difference between customers of what the developer was responsible for and what the operator was responsible for. They want it to be really easy to scale up or down or out, and they want really easy upgrades. So generally, the desired outcome from an operator with Gemfire is they want to minimize ongoing maintenance and support of services. So they don't really want to work with Gemfire at all. That's like one of the biggest insights here is I need to make it so that when an operator comes to use Gemfire, they can set it up really easily and then they can forget about it, and it kind of manages itself. And they don't face a lot of problems with it. They want to keep services up and running 24/7. They want to keep their clusters in compliance, and they want to allow their application teams to self-service. So every time their application teams want a cache, they don't want to have to make that application team make a request to the operator. The operator has to create and set it up and give it back. They want the developer or the application teams to be able to create the caches themselves. So we can create tools or resources or design the product in a way that makes sure that we have all of these needs and wants and desired outcomes covered while considering what the responsibility is of this service operator. So on Dovetail, I wrote out all of the key insights that we found from this research effort. And you can see that this directly informed the things that we're working on now or have been working on for the last year. So for example, our operators wanted better or consolidated tools for debugging and observability. A few mentioned that the GUI would be helpful for this, or that's a graphical user interface, as well as for other tasks like training, alerting, or CRUD operations. So we created an integration with Tanzu Observability. And Tanzu Observability is a user interface that is a product from VMware that helps our customers be able to look at their cache and look at its performance, and see if there visually, if there are any issues with the cache, and be able to address them using this monitoring tool. We also learned that operators want a self-service model for developers. So like I was saying, if a developer wants a cache, the operator doesn't want to have to create one for them. So for multiple insights here, we started working on a new management interface. So we're realizing that developers or operators are more and more requesting a user interface rather than a command line or just an API. So we're creating a management interface which will address a lot of these needs, like a self-service model for developers, showing issues with Gemfire, so kind of bringing in those monitoring capabilities and making it really easy to recover data or set up disaster recovery, scale your cache, and upgrade your cache or your cache instances really easily. And then in that same tool, operators would be able to flexibly control roles and permissions, which was another request. We also created the Tanzu Gemfire developer guides. So we wanted to be able to address the pain points that we were hearing from our users in multiple ways. So the developer guides are training tools, they're tutorials, there's example-based documentation. So if you were to go to the Tanzu Developer Center right now and click on data, you could see Gemfire there, and you would see a guide on how to use Gemfire with Spring Boot. So we're starting to create this example-based documentation. So when a developer knows, I want to use Gemfire for session state caching, they can go to these developer guides. There's a guide on session state caching, and by the end of that guide, they'll be able to have an application up and running with Gemfire. So now you can kind of see through all that research, it directly informed product decisions. Okay, so now I'm going to take some questions. Guess I can, should I look at the chat for those? Let's see. And you guys can add any additional questions that you have now. That's basically the end of my case study. So I see, which tools should you know as a UI or UX designer? That's a good question. And the first thing I will say is it's not necessarily about the tool, it's about the practice. So if you have access to something like LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, or even YouTube, you want to understand product design or user research practices. So what is the thing that I'm trying to learn? What do I want to understand about my users? Why is user research important? And then the tools that you use are nebulous. There's gonna be a new tool or 3 every year. So the tool is just a means to an end. Right now, the most popular tools are, for example, for user research is Dovetail, which I showed you guys. Another one for remote collaboration and just for like working out your thoughts or sketching out things is Miro. Another tool that I use often is Figma, and I use that for presentations and also for design and prototyping. Maybe I can actually show you guys an example of that since we're here. So Figma is just a prototyping and design tool. So for example, let's see, what's a good example? For example, I'm working on this management tool, so I can kind of visualize my ideas of how that should work. Some alternatives to Figma would be Sketch and Envision. There's also, let's see, Envision Studio, Framer. There are a lot of prototyping tools, so it's basically whatever Whatever tool is the most popular is useful to know for any job you're applying to, and then whatever tool your employer wants you to use. Let's see, Tanzu Gemfire user interview script of PowerPoint. You said one of your goals was how to get customers to spend more time on Tanzu Gemfire. Why are we pushing customers to spend more time on our product than he or she would normally spend? Okay, so let's go back and look at that. You said your goal is how to get customers to spend more time. I'm not seeing that here. But you are correct. We don't want to push our customers to spend more time with Gemfire. We actually want them to spend less time. So if at some point I did say more time, that was probably just a typo. We don't want our operators, our developers, to have to spend more time with Gemfire than they would have to, especially because Gemfire is just there to increase application performance. So yes, that's correct. We do not want to push our customers to spend more time with the product. Okay, what is the key or advanced skill for UI or UX designer? So I think the key skills are for a UX or UI designer. So for a UX designer, you want to be well-versed in user research and being able to take the user research, the things that you learn, and turn those into actual design or product decisions. So for example, if you were applying for a new job and you were doing a portfolio review, what an employer wants to see is your design process. So they want to see that you understand the problem that you're trying to solve and that you've defined that really well. They want to know that you understand your audience or your user, and they want to see the research that you did to validate all of the choices that you made. So every design choice, you should be able to defend that choice with either research or experience or current design patterns or practices. So user research is the most important for a UX designer, and then trying your best to keep up to date on best design practices by keeping up with design reading or blogs or things like that. For a UI designer, obviously you want to have skills in UI. So this is a user interface. So it's my responsibility to understand the user and the user's needs, and then I have to translate that into a user interface. So I have to be able to create these. There are a lot of online courses that will help you do UI design. You could even just use YouTube. I think access to Figma is free for one user if you just wanted to try it out. So that's what I would suggest. And some other great resources. Envision is a tool that's widely used by a lot of designers, and they'll often have career chats or workshops where you can learn how to do UI design or sometimes UX design. Well, let's see if there are any questions that I missed. I did see the UX or UI designers have a future. My answer would be, I hope so. And I definitely think so. Especially because if you have someone that advocates for the person using your product, you're always going to make decisions that will keep that person coming back because they're able to achieve whatever goal it is they want to achieve with your product. So in that way, I think UX and UI design will continue to evolve. It has already, with just my title being product designer. I'm responsible, for both. So it should be an interesting progression. Okay, I think I see one more question coming in, so let's see. What is the most interesting UI change that made a huge difference to the product? So that's interesting because specifically for this product, because Gemfire doesn't have a tool yet, except for our Wavefront dashboard. And I can actually show you guys that really quickly. And I think that the way that this new UI tool has been useful is that when you can visualize things like disk utilization or CPU utilization, it's way easier to see an issue. So if you were to see a drop or a spike in CPU that's happening regularly, then you can see that there's a problem. And usually if you were to highlight or hover over one of these screens, I have it here somewhere, we would give you a description of what, for example, what disk utilization is, some issues you might be seeing and some actions that you could take. I think this is by far the most valuable and useful tool we've created recently. And hopefully we'll just continue to expand on that with our new management tool. Before this, basically, if you wanted to see metrics, you would have to do that through a command line. So it wasn't a really very user-friendly. How do you keep yourself updated about the latest trends in technology along with current projects? Okay, so one of my favorite things to do is every morning, I like to look at The Verge, just a tech website. They also have things about design. But I also have this Chrome attachment called Muesli. So every time I go to open a new Chrome window, I can see all this design inspiration. And they have a lot of like important design articles, some UI inspiration, which is always fun to look at. So I can choose my design interest and then it pops these things in. I also just try to do things like going to UI or UX meetups. And usually there I'll hear about new books I could read. I love going to design bookstores and just picking up books on various topics. You can always learn a lot from product designers, from transportation design, from architecture, from photography. So I think taking inspiration from a lot of different disciplines helps with design. Okay, and then I'm seeing the question again about how to get a customer to spend more time on the product. So I'll just reiterate that is not our goal at all. I don't believe, let me just read this really quickly to make sure that I didn't write that here. Go back on experience. Yeah, we want to understand the time that's being spent managing Gemfire, but we definitely want to decrease that. We do not want to increase the time that a customer spends on Gemfire because it's not something like Instagram. Like, for example, a lot of the design team in Instagram is probably creating features that are slightly addictive. They want you to come back because the more time you spend on Instagram, the more money you have. But actually with the more money that they make. But with Gemfire, it's actually important to us that our customers don't have to use Gemfire often because the easier it is to use, the more they'll want to use it. Okay. And were there any more questions? How to get honest feedback from team members on your work. So I think that's something that you'll always have to work on with your team members. One practice that we do at VMware is something called plus deltas. So, or design critiques. So what plus deltas are at the end of the day, if let's say if you're working with someone often, or maybe at the end of the week or the month, you meet with that team member and the goal of that plus delta meeting is to give honest feedback. So the pluses you give are things that they did well, things that they should keep doing, and the deltas are things that they can work on or things that they should stop doing from your perspective. That's usually helpful because it's something that you do regularly, so people get used to giving honest feedback. The other is a design critique, which my team does bi-weekly. So each person will, put their name on the schedule to present some work. And I think especially within the discipline of design, it's normal to give very honest feedback. Sometimes it's good to go into design critique and define at the beginning that no one's trying to hurt the other person, that we're just all trying to do our best work and give our best constructive criticism. So I think that design critique, or just like defining a specific time for feedback, means that you'll get really honest feedback from your team members, and you all want to create the best product and keep moving forward in your career. So I think honesty is the best for that. And how do you evaluate your productivity? Is it okay to be stuck in one goal for a whole day? Yes. The way that we evaluate our productivity is by using a tool like Jira. So as a design team, we track our work, which is connected directly to our products. See, I don't know if that will load, but basically it's like a backlog of design work. So I can say, I'm working on this effort with my team. We think it's going to take about 2 weeks. I can put my little subtasks in each one so that my manager can see exactly what I'm working on. Maybe I can show you guys a specific one. Show you this one actually, if it loads. So yeah, this is just the way for us to see everything we're working on. I've got all of my research in here, and then I've got my subtasks, and I can check them off as I do them. So my manager can see what I'm actually working on every quarter, and he can see when I'm stuck on something or if it's taking a long time, and then he can ask me, you know, what are your blockers, and try to help me move through that. So it's less of a judgment thing and more of a helpful tool. So we can all see what the other is working on, and we can help each other if we have blockers. So, are there any other questions? How do you meet deadlines at work? I think the answer to that question is a lot of planning. We usually do quarterly planning as a team. So before the quarter or the fiscal year begins, we'll set out our goals for that year and break them up into quarters, for example, or plan for the next quarter. So the next like 3 months. The engineering team will outline the work that they're going to do in that 3 months. And then my work will be directly connected to what the engineering team is working on. So usually I'll try to be a couple weeks ahead of the engineering team with my user research, so that everything that we learn from that research can inform the design of whatever we're creating with the engineering team. So we set realistic deadlines and we evaluate our progress every week. How do you handle delays? That's probably more of an engineering question, because with design, I think, at least from my experience, delays are less likely. So I think we had a delayed release recently, and I think what we do is we just reallocate our team members to focus on fixing the blockers for that release. For example, we kind of put all of our efforts, or let's say 60% of our effort on handling that delay or maybe a customer issue, and then 40% of the team just carries on with work as usual.
Thanks, Kelly, for your informative session. So
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, now I would like I would like to hand over the session to Miss Harsha and Mr. Garg. So you both can take over the session, but please introduce yourself before starting. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemant. Hi, everyone. I'm Harsha, and I'll be speaking along with Greg. We both software developers in the Tanzu organization. So we're working with one of the teams called Services Control Plane. And what we'll be talking about today is extreme programming. So the agenda for the talk today is we'll briefly talk about one of the existing and like an old software methodology. Then we'll get on to what XP is, some values that form XP, and how do we put those values into practice. And then towards the end, we'll take questions.
So before we actually tell you what we mean by extreme programming, we should have a look at a bit more traditional software development methodology, the one that you might be familiar with, or you might have heard about. It's the waterfall methodology, right? So the waterfall methodology divides the whole software development process into at least five phases. Each phase has to be completed before the next one can start, right? So we've got 5 phases on the screen. We've got the requirements phase, where the customer the requirements are basically gathered from the customer. This phase can take months. Then we've got a design phase, which also can take months. That's where the architects and designers sit together and design the whole system. After that, we've got an implementation phase where developers execute the plans created in both of the previous phases. That one can take years depending on the complexity of the project. Finally, we've got a verification phase where the QA engineers check the product, the testers go ahead, check everything works as expected, and the product is finally released to the customer. And at the end, the maintenance phase, this is where the product is running, the customer is using it. There are obviously going to be some bugs and they're getting fixed as they found. So all of that time, all of that that cycle can take years. And the important thing to remember is that the customer is only present during the requirements phase at the beginning, and then at the end when they basically given a final product.
So let's try and understand this process by taking an example. Please note that this is a very simplified version of what a software process would look like, and also a bit more exaggerated. So we have a customer who comes to us, and what they want to do is build a chair. And they need a tool that can operate on a sharp pointed objects. And they'll be using the sharp pointed objects to join the spare parts of the chair. So our team spends, say, we spent months to gather the requirements, then 4 months to design it. We took a year to implement it and another 6 months to verify. So using the waterfall method, we spent around 2 years to build a tool that can help the customer build a chair. And at the end of 2 years, we built a hammer. And the team is happy that we finally delivered a product, but the customer is not. Right? The customer is surprised because we provided the customer with a hammer while they were expecting a screwdriver, because the sharp pointed object they had was probably screws and not nails. Now, if we think about why this might have occurred, there can be several reasons why we delivered a wrong product. Like Greg mentioned, the customer involvement is limited in the waterfall method, right? The customer was involved in the requirements phase, and then later towards the end when we actually delivered the product. So we couldn't get any feedback as to, are we going in the right direction, what is working and what is not working in terms of the product that we are building from the customer. It might have also occurred that initially the customer started with nails, but eventually they changed their sharp pointed object to screws. But given waterfall, we couldn't really accommodate that request very well. So how do we go about avoiding such situations, or at least minimizing them?
So that's when we get to talk about XP, right? So we know a bit more about waterfall and how it addresses the whole software development lifecycle. Let's see what extreme programming is about and how we can avoid that scenario that Harsha has just presented. So extreme programming is an alternative software development style which is more agile. It aims to improve the quality of the whole software in the face of ever-changing user requirements, right? It strongly focuses on the customer involvement. The customer is actually expected to be part of the team, and it also focuses strongly on the quick feedback loops. So that quote that you see on the slide, "Stay aware, adapt, change," is a quote from that book that you can see there as well, Extreme Programming book by Kent Beck, where he described his thinking behind the extreme programming methodology. So basically, the only constant in the software development is change, right? Requirements change, businesses adapt and change, technology changes, teams change. Basically, everything is fluid and changes, and XP tries to address that. That quote is, in my opinion, perfectly describes the intention of XP.
So we know what XP is, but how do we, what does XP, what is it formed of? So XP talks about 5 core values that every team practicing XP has to adhere to, right? They have to agree upon these values and try to work towards achieving them. So the first value is communication. Most of the problems in the software development process, if you think about it, are because of broken communication. It's some miscommunication or someone not talking to somebody else about something important. That is what you can trace back most of the problems to. So if we go back to the previous example where we delivered a hammer, but the customer was expecting a screwdriver, it might so be that the customer actually communicated the change of their requirement to the product managers or business analysts in the team, but it never got correctly communicated to the development team, right? To the developers in the team. And maybe that's where things went wrong, where the developers assumed something and built while the customer had communicated. So it's still some broken communication at some level. How can that be avoided? Or like, how does XP enable better communication? So most XP teams will follow or will have a meeting called stand-ups, which is usually a short meeting where the team comes together and they talk about things that they've done in the previous day, they plan for today, and any blockers, helps, or interestings that they had discovered in the previous day. Other ways are open offices. So what open offices mean is the entire team sits together. There are no cubicles. So the team, all the communication are in the open. So you can hear what other people are talking about. You can join the conversation, participate, learn. And the last important factor is that customer is part of the team. Like communication with customer is constant, right? Unlike waterfall, where they were involved in only in the initial and the end phases, here throughout the development process, customer is involved with the team.
Feedback is another great XP value. As I mentioned before, the only true constant in software development is change, right? So in order to notice and react to any changes, we need constant feedback. And ideally, we want it in the shortest time frame possible. Like looking back at the example that Harsha presented with the chair, had the customer been asked for feedback regularly throughout that whole cycle, it would have been quickly discovered that we're actually talking about two different things. We're talking about hammer, they're talking about a screwdriver. XP has this concept of feedback loops. You can see an image on the screen right now, outlining some of the practices that can be adopted in XP teams that help you gather feedback. At the bottom of that image, we have something called pair programming. We'll talk about this a bit more later, but the basic idea is you've got two developers sitting together solving the same problem, and that gives you feedback on either your design, your code, your idea, your direction within seconds, right? We also have a bit higher, we've got unit tests that give you feedback in minutes on whether what you're doing is correct or not. You also got acceptance tests somewhere at the top. Those can be created with the help of the customer, so they can give you feedback in like hours, or I think it says days in days, more hours these days. Yeah, so feedback, we want feedback because what's right for today may be wrong for tomorrow.
Right, so the next XP practice or value is simplicity. And what we mean by simplicity is whenever we approach a problem, we want to think of what is the easiest or simplest thing that we could do to solve this problem. A software development process or the problems that come to us are usually very complex, and we try to break them down into smaller problems, which can then be solved. So if we take the problem of trying to get from point A to point B, there could be multiple ways to get there, right? We could take this convoluted way where we go around in circles and like reach these different points and eventually reach B, or we can just go in a straight line from A to B. Now, this might look obvious, but when we get to development, it's not that obvious, and it's easier to get stuck in this kind of a mode. Now, if you think about why do we really need to do the simplest thing possible, XP usually tries to eliminate waste. So we want to learn a bit more about the product that we are building, the tools and technologies that we're using, the business problem that we are trying to solve. And with simplicity, what we are essentially trying to get to is do what is easiest today. And you can always come back, redesign things, or like improve your current design to change the way you're solving the problem, or to adapt the way you're solving the problem as and when you learn more about it.
Another XP value is courage, which is kind of self-explanatory, but it's what do we mean by courage? First of all, courage is effective action in the face of fear. How does it apply in software development, software engineering? I think the best way to explain this is with a scenario, right? Let's imagine a team of few developers, and there are developers with different levels of experience, all the way from junior through senior to a principal. And the team has a team lead, right? One day, one of the junior developers discovers a serious problem in the system, serious design problem in the system, but they're reluctant to bring it back to the team or talk about this at all, because it was created by, that particular part of the system was created by the team lead. 1 week later, the same piece of code, the same piece of the system has created a massive issue and massive outage, which caused the business thousands and thousands of dollars. And obviously, along with that comes some reputational damage. And so in XP, how could that be avoided, right? We can answer the question, how this could be avoided. That's where the courage comes in, right? The junior member of the team should have the courage to either fix the problem or bring the issue back to the team. XP encourages a collective ownership and accountability so that every member of the team, regardless of their experience, is empowered to make changes to any part of the system at any time.
The last, but in my opinion, the most important value of XP is respect. And what we mean by this is every opinion in the team matters. Every person in the team matters equally. So if we go back to the previous scenario, which Greg mentioned, maybe the junior member brought up the issue, but if the team doesn't respect the opinion, then all the XP values, they kind of fall apart. So this is the core for all XP values to work. And hence it's important that every team member is equally respected.
So now we know all of those great values, the 5 values of XP, but how do we actually use them in practice? So XP teams have certain practices that you can spot literally when you walk into the team's area. One of them is pair programming. This is a very popular XP practice, and it is what it says on the tin, right? You've got 2 developers working together on one machine, solving the same problem. Like you can see on this picture, 2 of our colleagues, they're sitting in front of a large screen. Each one of them has a keyboard and a mouse, and they can interact with the machine as they wish. And they're working through the problem together, right? The pairs are usually rotated daily. So one person will change and somebody else will work. But some companies take it to the extreme, since we're talking about extreme programming, and they rotate pairs more frequently, like every hour, for example, or every time they finish implementing a particular story or functionality. So what are the benefits of pair programming? Obviously, you've got some companies that are reluctant to pair programming because you've got 2 developers. Why are they working together solving the same problem? Why they can't just split out and each one of them solves different problems? It's going to be fast, it's going to be better for the company, right? Well, wrong. We all know that 2 heads are better than 1, right? You can leverage knowledge of two developers. The pair programming usually leads to a better quality of the code and generally a better design, just because the members in the pair keep each other honest. The knowledge is also shared when you pair program, which reduces the dependency on one individual. So if I was going to pair, for example, with Harsha today on particular functionality, and for some reason Harsha or myself are not available tomorrow, one of us can continue, and the work doesn't really stop. And another point, another benefit of pair programming is you've got the instant review, right? I mentioned a bit about the better design. You've got the instant review, so you don't need to have a separate phase as we saw in waterfall model when we had the whole verification phase at the end. Obviously, in some business context, that might be still necessary to have some sort of a verification phase at the end. So the values that this practice addresses, because we know them now, it's pretty much all of them. We've got courage. You have to be able to, express your ideas and in a healthy way challenge your pair if you don't agree. You've also got communication. You have to have really good communication skills when you're pairing. Feedback, I already mentioned, you get instant feedback on your direction, on your ideas. And obviously respect, right? If you don't have respect, this won't work, as Harsha mentioned before. XP won't work without respect.
So now, if two heads are better than one, mob programming is talking about expanding that practice to 3 or more developers. This is less common than pair programming and usually used in specific cases where you are trying to solve a very complex problem and you want to leverage the expertise of different developers on the team. So if you look at this picture here, this person in the back is what we call the driver, or is driving the problem now, which means that they are the one who is actually coding. So with mob programming, the idea is to keep rotating the driver every few minutes so that everyone in the mob is engaged in trying to solve the problem. The benefits are pretty much similar to pair programming, where you have knowledge sharing from different people, you get instant feedback and review of the problem that you're trying to solve. And hopefully it leads to better quality because you have so many different ideas coming in together. The values that this practice addresses are again very similar to pair programming. You need courage, communication, feedback, and respect. The next important XP practice is user stories. So user stories is a way to informally explain a software feature that you want to implement. It's usually written with the perspective of an end user. And we mention what is the goal that they're trying to achieve and what is the benefit or the outcome of that particular feature for the user. Let's take an example. As a frequent flyer, I want to rebook a past trip so that I can save time booking trips I take often. So here we're building an airline booking product or site, and our user that we're trying to target is a frequent flyer. So somebody who flies very frequently with us. And the feature that we are trying to provide here is an ability to rebook a past trip, a trip that they've taken in the past. And why do we want to provide this feature? Because we want our users to save time in being able to book that trip. So that I think this makes it easier, a better experience for our frequent flyers, where they don't have to go and look back at the itinerary and try to figure all of it again. Every user story with most XP teams, they estimate the stories. And what I mean by estimate is they try to look at different user stories and see, relatively size them or put a number on them in terms of how long it might take for them to develop it. And again, it's just an estimate. It might change. It's just a rough number to get a sense of how much we are investing in the story, and maybe also try to evaluate at some point what is the value that we are getting out of this investment. Now, you must be thinking, how is this different from requirements? It's similar to requirements in the waterfall model, right? Well, it is, except for the fact that requirement as a word means something that is mandatory or obligatory, right? So it has this connotation that it's absolute and has to be done, while a user story can be negotiated. Now that we're breaking a bigger problem into smaller stories, it's easier to identify what is it that I need and what is it that I don't need. As we learn more about our users, as we learn more about our product, it's easier to decide what we want to build. So some values that user stories address are communication, because you use user stories to communicate with your customers, with your team, to make them understand what you're trying to build, and also get feedback, because you get feedback from your team and from your customer in terms of, is it making sense, what can be changed, what needs to change. And also simplicity, because now we have broken a bigger problem into the smaller stories, smaller problems that we want to address one at a time.
So another practice, XP practice, is iterations. So we saw waterfall model. Waterfall model had 5 or more stages, and each stage had to complete before the next one. Iterations are different. XP teams divide the project into a series of weekly cycles that are called iterations, right? And each of those cycles, each of those weeks is expected to deliver fully functioning software. So you don't have to wait the whole 3 years to have something to play with as a customer, right? At the beginning of that kind of iteration, of that kind of cycle, the team gets together, and by the team, I mean the engineers, the architects, the customer as well. And then they select a series of stories that they think they can deliver in this particular week. So we've got that image on the slide there, which shows the bad way of doing this and the good way of doing this. So if we focus at the top, let's imagine we're building a car, right? And in the first iteration, we build a wheel. The second iteration, we build another wheel, then we've got the chassis, and at the end, after 4 weeks, we've got the whole car. So this is not what we mean by iterations, right? Because it violates the main principle that at the end of every week, you have something to play with. Wheel, well, the customer could play with the wheel, but it's not particularly useful. And they have to wait. The second iteration, we've got 2 wheels. Well, it's more useful, but it's still not really. So they have to wait till the end to actually have something to play with. Kind of like the waterfall model that we talked about earlier. The bottom one represents what we actually mean by iterations and how this should be executed. So in the first iteration, we deliver a skateboard. We're still building a car, but we deliver a skateboard. It's still not a car, but we can give it to the customer to actually play with, or travel if they wish. In the second iteration, we add a bit more user stories to build towards the car, but we still don't have a car. What we have is a scooter. But a customer, again, they still can play with it after the second week. And we carry on each week, building on top of the previous work that we've done till we deliver a car. But we go from the skateboard to scooter, bicycle, bike, and a car. And every week, every iteration, we give something to customer to give us feedback. So that's very important. Every iteration delivers something that the customer can play with. So values, if we come back to the values, this gives you a perfect feedback loop, right? If at the end of the week, we give something to the customer, they can play with it, and then they can come back and be like, well, yeah, that doesn't work, or yeah, that's great, you're going in the correct direction. It also kind of encourages simplicity. You've got limited amount of time, and you have to really carefully think how you create your user story so you can deliver something that functions at the end. It doesn't mean you can't have complex solutions, but you'll have to come up with ideas and steps to deliver it in that way where you can when you can give something to the customer at the end of each week. XP talks about, Harsh, if you can come back, XP talks about weekly cycles. This is not strictly true everywhere. Some companies are extending this to like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It all depends on the context that you are in. Now I'm ready for test-driven development. So test-driven development, or TDD for short, is another very popular XP practice. But before we talk about test-driven development, I'm just going to tell you about testing in general, what the tests are supposed to do. So a test that you write is supposed to verify the behavior of the system or of whatever you're creating or created already. So if you were building a calculator and you were trying to check whether the addition works correctly, you would write a test that would add 2 plus 2 and check whether the calculator returns 4, right? So tests basically are there to verify the behavior of the system. So test-driven development. Test-driven development is kind of known for this red-green refactor cycle. And each one of those, red is a phase, green is a phase, refactor is a phase when it comes to test-driven development. So that practice basically says that before you write any code whatsoever, any production code, you write a test first. Like in the calculator example, you would write that test, 2 plus 2 equals 4, that's your test. And since you have not written any production code for the calculator or the calculator code whatsoever, this test will fail. And it's represented by red because most of the IDEs these days will show you a red bar or red dot saying you have a test failure somewhere. It just basically doesn't work. So after you have that failing test, you implement just as little logic as possible to get that test to pass. So you could literally write 2 plus 2, return 4 or something like this. But it has to be as simple as possible to get the test passing. And that's the green phase. The green phase, it's green again because IDs will switch from red to green. You will get a green bar saying, yeah, everything is fine. All of your tests passed. And then you've got the refactor, the last bit that is really important, which is you might have cut corners. You might have called your variables n or I or something like this that are not really descriptive. That's the time where you want to actually clean those up and make the design a little bit better. After you've done with the refactor, you go again. The same cycle, red, green refactor. You write another test, testing another, like maybe 2 plus 3 should be 5. And you carry on till you implement the whole user story. So TDD and tests are basically there to provide you with a safety net, to validate your thinking and give you an instant feedback on whether you're going towards the right direction. So values, again, if we come back, again, I already mentioned 2 seconds ago, feedback, you get instant feedback. And they also encourage simplicity. One of the really core feedbacks that you get from tests is that if your test is really difficult to write, that means that your design is wrong. It's too complicated. It's too complex. You should think about simplifying some of that.
So the next practice that is very common in XP teams is continuous integration, or people also call it CI in short. If you think of the product that we're trying to build as a jigsaw puzzle, you are trying to put together these different pieces of the product together, right? Which might be your user stories. So what CI or continuous integration encourages you to do is whenever you find a piece or you build a piece that you're trying, that you've just built, you try to put it together with the rest of the picture. So you don't hold back until you finish the entire set, but integrate as soon as possible. Ideally, as soon as you're done, but not more than a few hours. But why really do this, right? Like, why should we integrate early? Why should we try to bring together the entire product as soon as we have made some changes in our code? So the idea is that when we integrate these changes, we run the build again, we build the entire product again, and we run the tests again that we learned about in the last phase. And we want to ensure that any changes that we have introduced now have not broken any existing functionality. So the system is still behaving as we had expected, and our changes are working in coherence to the existing product. What is the value that CI enable is feedback, because you're getting instant feedback as to how your changes work with the rest of the system.
Informative workspace is the last practice that we're gonna talk about today. Basically, what it means is make your workspace wherever you work about your basically what you're doing, what is the project that you're working on. Any interested observer should be able to walk into the team space and get a general idea of how the project is going in a very short period of time, within seconds, potentially. On the screen, you've got a board that is an example that could be part of that informative workspace, which basically shows the stories that the team has to do at some point in the future. The stories that the team is about to work on this week, that they plan for this week, something that's in progress, and whatever was already delivered. But that's not the only part of the informative workspace. You could have, whiteboards with hand-drawn diagrams on the direction of the design. You've got incident reports. You could also have monitoring screens when you can see whether there are any errors in your systems that are currently running, and so on and so on. So the values that this basically enables is communication. Again, you have nothing to hide. Anybody can come in and see what's going on, and perhaps provide you with, again, feedback. We're getting that feedback in all of the practices that we're talking about today. It's all about feedback. We want as much feedback as we can, so we can react to any changes. And finally, processes are for people, practices are fluid, values are not. So what this basically means is, we talked to you about a few practices of XP. It doesn't mean you have to use them all. As long as you meet the values, you should be fine, right? At the end of the day, again, processes are for people. They should make our work simpler, not more difficult.
So if we take an example of how the way we work has shifted after COVID, right? It's all remote. So if we think of pair programming, it's difficult to be in the same place. So we've moved to a model where we talk to each other over tools like Zoom, or there are other tools like Tuple, where you're still able to communicate and maybe share screen and switch those roles as to who drives. Also, how can we simulate an open office when you're not all in the same place? Like, how can you have those communications flowing? So it could be any tool that your team uses to talk to each other, like Teams or Slack, and you can have a common channel where all the conversations are happening in that channel. So you still have the ability to jump on a conversation to contribute. You're still available. So the practices, they have to be adapted based on what is working for the group of people who are trying to deliver the product. So basically the practices have to change based on the team. But like Greg mentioned, again, it's important to emphasize that the values are not compromisable, and the practices can adapt based on the people that need to follow them. And that's all we have for XP. I already see some questions in the chat box, but if you have any more, just put them in there. Okay, so the first question we have there is, waterfall model still used in developing the product of software? If so, why?
I believe so. Although I haven't worked on a waterfall model project, I'm definitely sure it is still used, probably on some legacy applications or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't have a real life experience with that.
Yeah, neither do I, but I think it's still used. And usually if you think about XP and agile practices, it's a lot of mind shift that is required. So I've worked with customers in the past, in my previous job where I was a consultant, where people were trying to adapt XP and agile practices. And it's difficult to bring that change because it requires a significant change in terms of the mindset. It requires the team to feel secure, to be able to make mistakes and be able to accept feedback in public. So I think it's still used. I don't have a very good reason as to why. Maybe because people have been practicing it and are comfortable with it, or maybe their business requires it to be that way. It's not changing very frequently and they're okay with following it that way. Could be that as well. I hope that answers your question.
We've got another one. Doesn't pair programming include customer? Well, that's an interesting question. I'm thinking about my career, and there were definitely moments when I worked with the actual customer in quotes on developing something, but I don't think so. I would imagine most of the time, if the customer wants to be involved, it would probably be something to do with either UI changes or maybe acceptance testing. It would probably also evolve into a mob. So we've got to have two developers and the customer kind of like hovering around. What do you think, Harsha?
Yeah, like I have worked in teams where we pair, like it's not really pair programming, but more pairing across roles as well, right? So maybe if you have quality analysts on the team or designers on the team, it's possible that developers pair with them so that you're able to get things done quickly. And like an example of that I have worked on is whenever you have something more user facing, right? And you're trying to build something, pairing with a designer in that case is extremely useful because you get instant feedback saying, oh, this is not right, a pixel here, a pixel there, or a color shift, right? So it won't ideally be pair programming, but I think pairing is still used in context where you can pair with customers like Greg mentioned, or with different roles in the team.
Yeah, we've got a note in theory. I learned pair programming is between a customer and a programmer. Pair programming is definitely a technique where you've got two programmers working together. I think in exceptional situations, you would have a customer, as we said.
Yeah. Are there any more questions?
Everybody's going to pair program from today.
All right. Hope we have no more questions from the audience. Thank you so much, Harsha and Greg, for your valuable information. Hope audience have gained so much of insights on extreme programming. Thanks for your time.
No problem. You're welcome.
Guys, if you have any questions, you can directly ask them. If not, we'll move further. All right, hope the session was crystal clear, so there are no doubts from the participants. Thanks once again, Greg and Harsha.
Thank you. The pleasure was ours.
Thank you.
So hello all. We are done with 7 days of training on VMware, and now it's time for building our projects. So this is Pradipti. I hope people from Python track already know me, and today I'll show you how to enroll for the project and what are all the procedure that you have to follow to complete your project. So can I start with it? Is am I audible? Can I get a yes from your side? Hope everyone is fine. All right, so let me share the screen. All right. So guys, from today, you can register, you can enroll for the projects, and I'll show you how to enroll for the project, right? So please visit the site smartinterns.com, smartinterns.com. I'm just putting the link in the chat window. All right, so once you navigate to the URL, you'll find challenges where you have to select VMware Tanzu Build-A-Thon. Click here So everyone have already visited the site, the site, and have seen the project structure and all, right? So if you scroll down, you have something called a project Build-A-Thon, where you can choose the project. Right now we have two tracks, one is Spring Boot and one is Python, right? All right, Kirivasan, please navigate to smartinterns.com, VMware Tanzu Build-A-Thon. You can watch the video for the registration process. But first, let me show you how the process goes, all right? Please visit the link that is given in the chat. You have two tracks, one is Spring Boot and Python. So people from Spring Boot can select Spring Boot and click on search. You'll get all the projects which are under Spring Boot. And people who are from Python track, they can select Python Flask and click on search. The projects regarding Python will be showcased. And you can also select the process based on the domain. We have different domains like automobile, finance, retail, telecom, health. So if you want to do a project on education, you just click on education and click on search. So the project under education for Python Flask will be given. So this is the search bar where you can search for different projects. All right. So this is, let me show you. Let's suppose this is any of the tracks project. It could be a Spring Boot or it could be a Python. The process will be same. If you want to enroll for a project, please click on enroll. Once you click on enroll, you'll be navigated to a page which look like this. And if you scroll down, you can see the architecture of the project and the project idea. What is actually the project idea? What is the solution that we would like to have from your side? And what are the features of the application? So you can just see all these description, and based on your choice, you can select the project and click on enroll now. Once you click on enroll now, you'll get navigated to the login page. If you've already got logged into our Smart Interns portal, give your email and password and login. Otherwise, click on registration. Give your name. Give a password. Click on register. It says my email ID is already registered. Let me check another email. Yes, I've successfully registered, and you'll get an OTP to your mobile. It's an individual project, Mehul. It's an individual project. One should opt for one project. The OTP is not yet given. Yes, Stephen, you will have mentors who can guide you if you're stuck somewhere. No, Balamurugan, it's only, you can only get registered for one project. I got an OTP. Activate your account. Now please log into your account. Tomorrow, Pratiksha, click on login. So it will ask you to give your details like the profile. So please give proper information. The reason is this is the information that will get printed on the certificate that you receive. So make sure you give the proper information. Right now, I'm not giving proper information, but you please give it. So if you have any skills, you can add the skills. So please add at least one skill like Python or anything. So let me select as Python, and you can also rate your skill like 20% or so. Click on save. Interested technologies, let me give it as IoT, AI, ML, etc. Interested offerings like anything, internships, give any of the options. And click on submit. Make sure you give the proper information. Right now, I'm not giving proper information, but you please give the proper information. So you have uploaded your project, you have uploaded your profile, and you can go to your dashboard. Please go to your dashboard. Click on dashboard. You can see the projects. Now, before I have enrolled for a project, right? So that project is being showcased over here. Now, if you open that project, you can find the instructions of that project. And if you click on this project option, you can go to the workspace. So here you'll see the overall project progress in the assigned task progress. That's what I have shown you, Shraddha. First of all, you have to go to the link there, select the project, search, click on enroll, register yourself, log in. Once you log in, fill your profile. Once you fill your profile, go to the dashboard. This is how your dashboard look like. In that, go to projects. Inside the projects, you'll find all the projects that you've enrolled for. And once you click on the enroll project, this is how it looks like. So before starting your project, it will be 0% and 0%. Once you start your project and moving your tasks, you can see your progress over here. I'll also show you how to move your tasks to review and all. So this is the project, guys. If you click on this green button, you can find what are all the milestones that you have to do. Setting up an application environment, implementing web applications, set up the mobile environment. So excuse me. If you click on that orange color milestone, you'll find what are all the tasks that you have to go through. So step-by-step procedure for building a project with reference links is given. Shraddha, have you enrolled for a project? If not, please refresh. Otherwise, log out and log in. You can see that. All right. Sangeet, it's just a static time. Don't worry. But yeah, you have to complete the project in 7 days. All right. So once this is done, you can actually get collaborated with the GitHub repo. So please click on GitHub. If you have a username and all, you can just give the username and click on check and collaborate. I'll check with it, Hardik. If it is for 3 weeks, yes, then that's fine. So collaborate it. Once you can collaborate it, after completion of your project, you can upload your project files onto that GitHub. And this, you have a project documentation. So this is like enabled with a password. You can find the password on the screen itself, on the dashboard screen. please copy that password and put it in the Zoho writer. This is the document, guys. So after you complete your project report should be given over here. You have to write your project report in this document, all right? And once you are done with any of the tasks, you have to tell mentor that you have completed your task. That can be done through the task in progress. You can see you have different kinds of tasks that are available in the project. All right, so please drag and drop it to review. Please drag and drop it to review. Once you drag and drop it to review and inform the mentor about your project, mentor will review the project before moving this into the tiles into this Kanban dashboard. You must first upload your project onto GitHub. Once you pull this tiles towards this review process, that means you're done with the project, and the mentor should review your project. Once the project is reviewed by the mentor, if he feels that's good, then he will move that to complete section. Otherwise, he'll move to the backlog section. So once the user moves this to the complete section, then the overall project should go for 90% or 99%. Once everything is done, once the review is done, you will have final exposure. I mean, how many you will have the final exposure of your project. All right, so this is how you have to do. And if you want to talk to mentor, you can either use Telegram and also mentor review section, but I request you to use Telegram itself. All right, so that you can get queries then and there itself if you use Telegram. So this is the project dashboard, guys. Shraddha, don't worry, that is all of you, don't worry, that is the static time for project. So whatever the project timings that were given to you, in that time itself, you have to complete your project. Dheeraj, actually, you can find different templates, like you can download free HTML templates and code it accordingly. So you can see you have free website templates, CSS and HTML. So you can download that and you can work with it. If you see, these are all the websites. So you directly download it. Your template with your HTML files with CSS files will be downloaded. Tomorrow is the deadline, Amol. All right, Dheeraj. Stephen, it's not Stephen. If you see, we are four mentors, and in Telegram group we will be assisting you. All right. All the details regarding the winners and everything will be shared with you soon. All right. Hopefully, I think there will be winners for Python Flash Track as well as Spring Boot. All right. If it's not showing, Shraddha, please log out on login. All right, guys. So this is how you will by tomorrow, you have to choose the project and enroll for it, everyone. Yeah, you can enroll tomorrow, but make sure you enroll as soon as possible. Once you have enrolled the project, then that is the start date of your project, and we will be giving you the timelines when you have to complete the project and all. So tomorrow you will have all the details regarding the timings and all. Right now we do have a build-a-thon itself, Aditya. Ayushi, if you enroll in May, then this is a competition, right? So you have to enroll in this week and you have to complete it in the coming weeks itself. You cannot postpone that into May. navigate to smartinterns.com/smartinterns.com. I'm again showing you guys. Let me log out. Smartinterns.com. There, click on challenges. Select VMware Tanzu Build-A-Thon. Scroll down. You will find all the projects which are available. All right. So now let me select Spring Boot. Search. Enroll for any project. Enroll now. If you have not yet registered, please do register and fill your profile. If you have already registered, please log in. Let me log in. Please click on login. So you'll be redirected to the dashboard. Yeah, see, if you see in the projects, you can see the other project that I have enrolled for. If you have not enrolled, then you'll not see the project. Satish, I've just now shown you. You can enroll only for one project, Amol. Your projects will be once you complete that project and once you move your tiles to Kanban dashboard, your mentor may put a meeting and review your project. He'll ask you to show a demonstration video, or he might ask you to show the output, or he might ask you to put the screenshots and put everything in the GitHub. After you show your demonstration and all, the mentor will look at the code, how you've written it, and he will see how are you using any sort of structured programming and all, and then he will decide whether the project is fine or not. Krishna Vamsi. Shraddha, there was a class yesterday, but it's still 6:30 still. So the class was uploaded in the YouTube. You can go through it. It's just a theory class given by VMware people. All right, guys, hope you understood how to enroll for the project. And if you click on that project, you can go to the, after finishing that particular part of the project, you can move it to the review section or only after. It's better. You can directly move each and every task to the review part, but every time you have to upload the documents and upload the code into the GitHub. So what I suggest is once you complete your project, you can ask the mentor to review it. Otherwise, if you wanna get reviewed task by task, that is also fine. Mentor has not started yet. You'll not get any sort of that error, Shraddha. I've just now enrolled for it, right? Please click on project. You can go to the workspace. You'll find all the links regarding the project, and you're good to go. Yes, ma'am. Faculty can register. They can do the project, but prizes are only for students. All right, guys. So I hope everyone understood how to enroll for a project. Based on the project, based on the idea, based on the solution that we require, if you want to use any sort of technology, that's fine, but we need a modernized app. That's it, Amol. The criteria is you have to create a modernized app which actually meets the requirement that we have given. Yes, Srinivas, we will be sending all the final date and start date of the project in the first half, tomorrow in the first half. Krishna Vamsi, actually, we will be allocating times for completing your projects. So within that time, if you complete, yes. If you have not completed within that time, then your project will be eliminated. Yes, you can include someone by. So this is how you have to enroll for the project, and make sure you go through all the instructions before you complete your project. Understand the problem statement and give your solution according to it. So whoever has understood how to enroll the project and everything, they can leave. So Shweta, as I said, the uniqueness, the novelty, the UI, how good you are projecting, how well you are explaining about the project, how confident you are about the project. So all those kind of things will be seen, and then your project will be judged. No more online classes from now. Docker is where you are uploading your image, Dheeraj. Here you have to upload your project. In GitHub, all right? We must see the code and everything, right? So that is possible only in GitHub. And in GitHub, you have to give the links of your image. Yes, Saranya, today's recording will also be uploaded onto YouTube by tomorrow. So all the best, guys. Try to create very wonderful apps. We'll be sharing that in the Telegram group, Sharun. Yes, Vijayalakshmi ma'am. It's the only way you can connect to the mentors. We have a group communication channel, right? So everything will be posted through communication channel, Nidhi. If you already have an IDE, why to install another IDE, Girivasan? Only one Telegram group is there for VMware, Pratiksha. Thank you so much. For number of people, there will be different mentors, not for each and every project. Okay. Once you fix the project, you cannot change the project later, Sandesh. We will be giving you the feedback link in the Telegram group. So with this, I would like to end the session. Thank you so much, guys. If you have any queries, please do ping in the Telegram group. Please watch the video that will be uploaded later, guys. By tomorrow, you have to submit the project enrollments. Why we download? What is that? Why we download? Every information will be given in the Telegram group, Stephen. Please wait for it. Tomorrow, what time? Regarding probably as soon as possible, you just enroll for it, guys. Yes, by tomorrow 10 o'clock, the video will be uploaded onto the YouTube. So by 12, we request everyone to enroll for the project. Telegram group link is available in the meeting link that is given to you. Very well, sir. I'll just look into it and we'll let you know. Sure, everything will be posted in the Telegram group, guys. Thank you so much, everyone. So I'm ending the session. If you have any queries, please post your queries in the Telegram group. Thank you.